great pleasure for me to welcome you to this international meeting, NECE 2014, here in Vienna. Welcome. Our present situation is tightly connected with the neglect of history. Another reason why we need history concerns the fundamental task of citizenship education. Citizenship education as a critical and enlightening authority will always strive to critically question power and power structures.
On the one hand, I think it is good to combine historical questions with recent questions. So if that we can draw some lessons from the history, from the past.
Of course, as citizenship educators, we are interested and we are urged actually to look at the current conflicts inside of Europe and around Europe.
At the same time, it's very, very important to bring these people together in an international discourse and to listen at one another and to listen and to see which perspectives exist. Because if we do citizenship education in our countries, we are also facing very diverse populations, and sometimes the conflicts in and around Europe are reflected in our respective countries.
Certain way, the Euro crisis has also distracted political attention from two important developments. One is the deterioration of democracy within EU member states, with Hungary being the main example, and the fact that the European Union as such, and also European citizens to some degree, have not been able to respond to this deterioration in any kind of coherent way. Secondly, we've also found that enlargement or Europe's engagement with the wider world is not just up to the EU itself. So people have talked about enlargement, fatigue, about the limits of the so-called absorption capacity of the European Union. But what all of a sudden we found in 2013, 2014 is that the extension of the EU association agreements, democracy promotion, if you like, promotion of European fundamental values, all of a sudden we found that this also has a geopolitical dimension. And this has in many ways come as a kind of shock.
To claim there's been a normative disintegration is to say that there's been some normative platform initially, and although there's been Council of Europe and various bodies that have done that, and human rights and so on, I wouldn't see a particular disintegration of that. Coming from England, I find that young people in England don't see themselves as European citizens, and in that sense you might say that it's disintegrated, but I'm not sure they ever felt integrated into Europe anyway, in spite of all the European projects. Much more emphasis these days on global citizenship generally.
Mental maps is a very interesting term that Christopher Clark introduced, and I think mental maps are what drives memories. They're deeply connected with the emotional impact of memories, and it's something that is not so easily to be grasped by just studying the history of the war. It is what is left from the history in the memory of the people that drives them, maybe almost unconsciously, to make certain decisions.
My argument is that far-right or radical right parties have been particularly successful in recent years in exploiting the issue of Euroscepticism and also linking it with opposition to economic and cultural globalization. To put it very simply, being Eurosceptic gains more votes than being anti-immigrant and is less contentious.
I think that we need a new concept in terms of citizenship education. I think that it's quite often problematic to think that the problem and the cause of conflict is citizens not being very good citizens, and it tends to argue that if only we could educate people better, then there wouldn't be conflict. And that takes away a lot from international relations, from power relations, and it tends to sort of say that people decided to have conflict.
Citizenship education is not acting in a vacuum of science or of education. We are actually acting in between political power structures, and we have to be aware of that, I would say more and in every moment, so that we know with what players around we have to deal.
Citizenship education, I think, is a very powerful instrument at the current moment, because many of the conflicts that Europe is engaged in are about values precisely. Think about the conflict in Ukraine, which is a conflict within Ukraine, but also between Europe and Russia, about two visions of a society, between a modern liberal order and a more conservative authoritarian order. And values are very much what is at stake, even if the conflict is fought out, of course, with other means. And here it's a matter not only of political advantage, but also about convincing individual per individual that our liberal modern values are worth defending and upholding. And all the groundwork that can contribute to that is very powerful and valuable.